Death Experience. Yo, what's going on? It's someone that's no one, and welcome back to today's report. Today's report is coming from Zabrina off ETHEREUM. When this happened, 2003. The drug used was Amanita Muscaria at a dose of 28 grams. The route of administration was oral. Gender, female. Weight, 100 pounds. And the setting was at her apartment, but eventually was taken to the hospital. So this is an overdose Amanita Muscaria trip. It was quite impulsive, but it seemed to be accidental for the most part, and the experience turned to be quite pronounced, to say the least. So I'll let you guys hear it for yourself. I hope you guys are going to like this one, and without further ado, let's dive right into it. There is much debate about the toxicity of Amanita Muscaria. I would like to relate my experience with the mushroom as a warning to others. I do not recommend amanitas. In fact, I recommend staying as far away from them as you can. I had with me an ounce of Amanita Muscaria mushrooms. They were red-capped with small white spots on the top. I had not taken anything or any substances, including alcohol, for over several weeks at the time I decided to experiment with the mushrooms. I was alone in my home in my apartment that day and bored. I consumed a large amanita, approximately 2 inches diameter cap, with several smaller ones and some stems that weighed out to be 1/8 of an ounce. I then sat down and waited for the mushroom to have the anticipated effect. I waited a full hour and nothing happened. I believe now that perhaps the mushrooms were already slightly affecting my judgment at the time and I was unaware of it. At any rate, I believe myself to be disappointingly unaffected. I believe that perhaps the Amanita mushrooms were not going to affect me in any way. Just to check and see if this was correct, I then proceeded to consume the rest of the mushrooms. This was approximately a few more smaller stems with red cap stems measuring approximately 1 to 2 inches in diameter and a larger full-size mushroom cap of approximately 12 inches in diameter. Counting the 1/8 ounce of mushrooms I had consumed an hour earlier, along with the ones I continued to consume, I ate a total of 1 full ounce of Amanita Muscaria mushrooms. I had never eaten Amanita Muscaria before, and I am a female of 100 pounds. The 12-inch mushroom cap tasted unbearably horrible. I don't even remember how I forced the mushroom down my throat, except for the fact that I do not like to leave that which I've started unfinished. After about 5 minutes of this last consumption of the amanitas, I could feel the mushrooms taking effect. My head was light suddenly, and immediately afterward, the room began to spin. I could barely see anything. I have experienced many other substances before, and I knew that I was ODing. I am not sure how, because I couldn't see very well, but I ran out of my apartment 5 blocks down to where my apartment clubhouse and office was located. I knew that I had to be around people because I wasn't going to be okay. I made it to the clubhouse, but barely. By the time I got there, I couldn't see anything. All I could comprehend was the feeling of dizziness, or rather, spinning sensations. I had no notion of whether I was sitting or standing. I have never been so unaware of my surroundings from any substance before. All I could comprehend was this spinning sensation. It was not merely a sensation, but I was spinning. It went faster and faster, the spinning becoming more and more complicated, and I couldn't stop it. It was faster than anything I have ever experienced before. It was my body and soul spinning faster than the speed of light. This doesn't sound that horrific, but it was not something one can easily comprehend. The spinning continued to increase in its complicatedness, and I could see that it was the spinning of the universe. It was like the way of life is put together, and I was comprehending it. It was just blowing my mind, and the spinning just became faster and faster, and it was spinning me in an even bigger circle of all the spins. And then there came a time when the spinning of the spinning of the spins was at the end of the spinning loop, and about to spin even faster. For some reason, I knew I had to make a choice. I could choose to give in to the spinning, or I could choose the harder choice. I didn't know what the harder choice was, but I knew it would be hard. I almost chose the spinning, but for some reason, I didn't. I chose the harder choice, which I didn't understand. Then I was in a void. It wasn't even black. for colors, thoughts, emotions, and feelings didn't exist. It was totally and completely void. I was terrified, but it wasn't a feeling. It was more like my soul was terrified. The closest way to describe the void is the color black. You don't even know how many sensations you are actually experiencing every moment until they are all taken away from you at once. All of them. This experience I fought with choosing the hard way. The harder I fought, the easier it became. As I fought, don't ask what I was fighting, I don't know. I could hear sounds of people's voices. They were getting louder. It was as if I was coming out of a tunnel or a fog, as if they or I was coming from a distance. It was not only the sounds of people's voices, but the sounds of me returning to the world. The next thing I knew, I was woken up in a hospital bed. I had IVs all over my body. This is what I found out. 1. I was just inside the apartment clubhouse when my apartment landlord discovered me unconscious and unresponsive. She called 911 after unsuccessfully trying to revive me. When the ambulance and hospital people got to me, I was defecating on myself. I was told that your body expels all of its waste before you die, which is why this was happening to me when they found me. 3. By the time they got me to the hospital, I was clinically dead. My heart had stopped. 4. I had been in the hospital 3 days and 2 nights before I woke up. 5. The nurses and doctors and examiners told me I had a seizure but could not determine any cause of such. To this day, I do not know if I actually had a seizure during or after my experience or not at all. I believe I may have, but did not tell the hospital or any of its employees that I had eaten the Amanita Muscaria. 6. The doctors told me that for some time I was in a coma. They would not have been surprised if I did not come out of the coma, ever. For some reason, I know that if I had made the other choice to keep spinning faster and faster out of control, I would have been in a coma and then eventually the black void, death. 7. I was scheduled for an MRI but was given a different test instead. I can't remember what it's called, but they proceeded to apply glue to various parts of my head and hair to test my brain by way of some device with elaborate workings. They found nothing. Being a first-time Amanita Muscaria user and lightweight female, consumption of an ounce was not the wisest course of action. I am not one for submitting reports or telling others my experiences, but I felt compelled to do so this once concerning relevant experience. I was clinically dead and most likely should have died from my usage of Amanita Muscaria. If I had not been found dead at that moment and rushed to the hospital, I would be dead today. I consider myself lucky to be alive to tell this story. If I had died, I wouldn't be able to warn others about this toxic mushroom. It can and will cause death if abused. I know, and anyone to think otherwise, be warned. Personally, I would stay away from Amanita Muscaria. There are plenty of other, safer substances out which can give one the experience you're looking for. It's not worth the risk. Nothing is worth your life. I now know that. Well, this has been one like many others I've come across, at least at this dose. Very intense, like on a universal scale. But before we get into that, let's break down Amanita mushrooms a little for those unaware. So I'm sure most people here know of the classic game franchise, the Mario Brothers, and how in the game, as Mario, if you go eat the mushroom, Mario gets bigger. Well, that red and white mushroom is actually based off Amanita Muscaria, which I guess in a way, if you look at it from a direct standpoint in Mario, the mushroom would symbolize growth. While in a way, you may grow in ways from the experience itself, this mushroom very well does have the potential to be deadly due to poison. I'm sure you can tell by the dread feelings Zabrina had when she had to make her way to the apartment clubhouse for help. Especially at 28 grams, it is a serious life or death matter, a trip that can bring you close to the edge of your life. But let's break down Amanita Muscaria a little bit because it isn't just like a different mushroom trip. First of all, it doesn't act on the same receptors in our brain as when mushrooms are generally what most psychedelics would, usually 5-HT receptors. Instead, the two main active ingredients, which is mucimol and ibotenic acid, agonized NMDA, the GABA-A, and metabotropic glutamate receptors, which if you don't know what any of those do, don't worry, I'll simplify those down. Now the GABA receptors are often affected when you take a downer, alcohol, benzos, and whatnot, so it's common to experience drowsiness similar to that, but not exactly, since the substances bind to the receptors in different ways. It is somewhat more comparable to Ambien or a recent substance we've covered, sopaquone. Now muscimol causes the effects on the GABA, while ibotenic acid causes the effects on the later receptors, which typically has effects on perception and control, but due to in vivo carboxylation, the ibotenic acid actually converts into muscimol, causing further effects on the GABA receptors. Because of this, it is thought muscimol is responsible for a majority of the effects, which, in result, it is dangerous to combine this with other depressants as the risk of overdosing increases. That is, let alone taking this substance by itself and dealing with the poison. Now, looking at Zabrina's report, if she didn't make it clear enough, she didn't make a very good choice about eating a whole ounce of these mushrooms she acquired. Now, the eighth of mushrooms she consumed prior to this may have actually had an impact on impairing her judgment, which, hey, there are a lot of substances that can do this, and in result, we may end up thinking we should take more, or take more without realizing the consequences, or realizing we're doing it at all. This type of behavior could easily be prevented by an informed sitter. Because she got a new batch of mushrooms, it isn't clear how strong that batch actually was. Now sometimes you can eat that much, but more often than not, you shouldn't even risk it with some in low potency. Also, the trip sitter could have better helped get her to the hospital, of course, but what happened. But I do want to bring up the trip First I Met God, Then I Was God by Synthesis, the first Amanita Muscaria report we ever did, where he also reports consuming 28 grams, which I didn't intend on the doses to be the same at all. But in his report, he reports more of an active, universal experience as he explains coming to see infinity and the Big Bang over and over again, and eventually feeling like he was God. This is definitely a more lively experience compared to Zabrina, but the level of intensity seems to be the same. He does mention throwing up a few hours after taking them, which may have helped decrease the risk of poisoning. And the other trip I want to bring up is pretty similar to this one in content, is Entheogenic Amanitas by Tengu, Japan, in which the user consumed 8 grams of Amanita pantherina, a close relative to the muscaria here. In his trip, he ended up amongst somewhat of a crossroads between what Zabrina and Synthesis experienced. He mentions it started very intensely with a lot of spinning and coming to feel like he was soaring around the universe, but he ends up describing it as a black hole-like abyss, not too far off a theme from what Zabrina experienced. But with that, I still think there is a lot to fill in with what can be experienced on Amanitas. Only more reports will tell that. So I hope you guys did enjoy this video. Like the video if you did, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, follow the socials. It's been someone that's no one, and I'll see you guys next time. Peace out.